Well, here we go. Time to replace the BMS board. Inside this LifePower4 battery. As you may recall, this is the battery that would not charge and it would not discharge. It would just simply stay at 66 or thereabout percent charge. So Signature Solar has sent me a new board. It's in this box. I haven't opened it yet. And they sent this list of detailed instructions. And there are a lot of screws to take out. So, I hope I don't have any extra ones left over when I get through. Let me get busy. I've got the cover off, and this thing seems to be pretty neatly made. Welded connections. One thing I do find interesting though are these battery connections. They're using two small wires there, probably 16mm cables, splicing into a 25mm cable, and then that is what's running out of here to the battery post. That red wire is 25mm, and it's going to the breaker, and then it's coming back from the breaker to the positive battery post. The negative wire is going to the BMS, and then coming back from the BMS over here. And it really is interesting that it uses big wire inside this battery, and then send these little rinky-dink battery cables that are 16mm, using 25mm inside the battery, and then sending a 16mm cable for you to use outside the battery. Just an interesting observation. As I mentioned in a previous video, this version of the LifePower4 battery does not have a ground stud. I think the newer versions, the LLV2, has an external ground stud. But the way this can is bonded, or the grounding works on it, is that this mount here is bare galvanized, and it mounts here to this bare galvanized like so, and that bonds this mounting bracket to this frame. Now this part of the mounting bracket is bare galvanized as well, and it goes up in here. So this part will actually be mounted in here like this, and that takes this galvanized steel and puts it up hard against this nut. I don't know if that's the best connection in the world, but that's the only connection that you got. Now I've ohmed it out for continuity, and this frame is bonded, so I mean it's bonded back to my ground, which I have mounted right up there. But that's how they're doing it. Okay, I've got the board changed out, and it wasn't that difficult. I mean, there's quite a few screws you have to remove, and I guess the most difficult part was removing all this silicone that they had these connectors glued in with, so that was a bit of a chore, but it wasn't too bad. There's like 6 screws holding this board in. These 2 screws had to come out, and then underneath there were 2 screws. This piece had to come out. I also had to disconnect here so I could pull this out of the way. And there's red wire which connects to the positive on the battery plug. It had to come out. And then the unplugging of these things. So it really wasn't that bad. The instructions suggested that I remove these screws, this bracket on the back of this breaker, because they sent a replacement cable right here that would have plugged in here and then wired back to the shunt trip on this breaker. But there's nothing wrong with that cable that's there, and I didn't want to have to hassle with this breaker trying to line all the stuff back up. So there was enough slack, I could lay this down. So I just reused the same wires. Now I put a little bit of tape on there just to kind of identify where the connectors plugged in on the circuit board. And if you're taking things loose, it's always good to mark things. Take pictures, that way you could always go back the way it was. I'm just gonna leave that tape. I know it looks kind of crummy. I wasn't planning on leaving it, but I'm just gonna leave it. All right, now I gotta button this thing back up. So let me get busy. Okay, the BMS has been replaced, and I charged it using this little portable charger up to 100%, and it charged to 100%. So I'm gonna say this is working. Now, if you recall before, this is the battery had the bad BMS. It would not charge and it would not discharge, and it stayed in a state of charge of around 66%. And when I put this little portable charger on here, it wouldn't show any charging current. So I replaced the BMS, and as soon as I hooked it up, as soon as I got it all put back together, I connected to it here, and it showed a charge of about 35%. So obviously the BMS that was in there before wasn't even reading properly. But at any rate, she's ready to go now. Oh, well, let's see, it says it's not connected. Let me see what that means. I think I'm gonna have to just reconnect. If I can find my mouse pointer. There it is. Okay, it's connected. Let's just clear it out, add it back, see what we got. Okay, it's the same thing. So we're good to go. Now I just got to put it back in this rack, and it'll be going right down there. But that'll be another day. Right now I'm running on the battery bank. It's 7:13, and my bank is at 92%. LifePower4 says 92%. You see I'm pulling out 117 amps from the battery bank right now. So we're good to go. Sometime this weekend maybe. I do have to work Saturday and Sunday, but sometime this weekend I'll try to shut the system down and install this battery back in here. All right, that's where I am.